This episode of the Chalkboard Podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a free 30-day trial when you visit audibletrial.com/chalkboard. Hey everyone, welcome to the Chalkboard Podcast. We are bringing you conversations from our home, Kansas City, Missouri. My name is Eric Milner. With me as always is my best friend and co-host, Micah Conkling. Micah, what's up, buddy?
Hey, what's up? So you're hearing this episode in March. We recorded it back in February in the midst of an ice storm in Kansas City. Dude, it's hot out here.
It is. It's real cold.
And it reminded me of the time that I think we were in college. You were living at Marcus and Missy's house.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I traveled from my home in Smithville down to like the middle of the Northland to get you in a snowstorm, and we drove to McCoy's.
We used to do this every Monday for $7 pitchers, burgers, and pizza.
Which is now $8 at McCoy's.
And we promptly quit going.
Yeah, but I got my car in a ditch in their neighborhood in the snow, and a guy towed us out, and guess where we still went?
We still went downtown. We shouldn't have left that neighborhood, but we did. I love it. Those were the days, the heyday of our decadence.
The heyday of our decadence.
So this episode, we sat down with Cameron Niederhauser, who is opening East and West Kansas City, a men's clothing, denim, and footwear shop in the Crossroads district of Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah, and Cam sat down with us. We talked about his inspiration for getting into fashion and his dream of opening up a men's store. It was really cool to hear kind of just him earnestly talking about what he's passionate about and how that is tangibly now a store in the Crossroads district.
Yeah, sitting down with Cam was one of the most fun times I ever had doing this podcast, so I'm really excited to dive into this.
All right, we're here with Cam Niederhauser. Cam, thanks for being with us.
Of course, man. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, we're really excited for you to be here. Let's just dive into it. You are opening up an East and West store in Kansas City.
Correct.
What made you decide to do that?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I have, for literally as long as I can remember being like a sentient adult, which was like sometime back in college, the dream for me, I know dream is kind of it's like a soft word to use for it, but like the end goal for me as I saw kind of what I wanted to do with my career was to own a store. And so the East and West name is something that a friend of mine started in St. Louis, and him and I have kind of together dreamt about doing something here, and then all the pieces kind of came together. The market kind of opened up in the right way for us too here in KC, that doing a shop finally became a reality that was not just a dream, but something that was more possible. So we started pursuing it in a real, like, concrete way about a year ago, in terms of just putting the pieces together and starting to get that process working forward. And then, that snowballed into me leaving my job and opening a men's clothing store in the Crossroads. So cool. It's wild to think about. So
I want to know about the dream that got you to this dream. Is it a love of fashion or like entrepreneurship? Like where did that all come from?
Oh man, that is
like, when did you start becoming
all of those things?
When did you start becoming aware of like clothing, fashion, and being conscious of that?
So that for me, that goes all the way back to high school for me. I remember like being really, really bummed when I didn't win Best Dressed as a senior in high school.
Oak Park,
because I thought I earned it, man. Yeah. I thought I'd locked it down. No, a good friend of mine did, and he cheated because his girlfriend dressed him. His name's Peter Neckvattle. He's a soccer player. Shout out to Peter. Shout out to Kaylee.
Who dresses better now?
Oh. I gotta say me, but that's no shade, Pete. If you hear this, you dress really well too.
It was always going to be Cam.
It was, dude. That said, he probably doesn't browse the internet as long as hard as I do to find clothes. So he should take no slight for me saying that it's me now. But yeah, man, I was into it. I don't know what it was. Like, I just liked clothes. Like, it quickly turned into a hobby for me in college, and that was like right about when, there was this turning point in the market at large where being into clothes for men slowly became a thing that was more socially acceptable in that sense. It's like right around 2009, 2010, there was that push toward, American made, and obviously the economy was in a bad way, and there was this push toward durability and buying with value, buying less but buying better, and that whole circle created a group of guys who was generally more comfortable talking about being into this sort of thing. And that's when I kind of came into a real, I wouldn't say obsession, but when I got really deep into pursuing different brands that had popped up who were manufacturing in the U.S. and getting any kind of the niche side of clothing. And that happened in college kind of as even, which is a big part of how I got to where I am now, is Baldwin was starting to, really make a name for itself here in KC as it started in 2009 when I was in college and had good friends who worked there. So that was an easy outlet that plugged me in to even start thinking about it as a career in Kansas City was, because of what was going on here with Baldwin and with that group of guys who was, turning people on to what buying stuff that you plan to wear for a long time and what made it worth it. So I've now lost your question a little bit in my rambling response, but
I do want to go back. So Eric, we're all men of about the same age.
Correct.
Which is the new name of this podcast.
Men of
about the same age.
What were some of the worst trends for guys in our lifetime? Like in high school, college? I just want to know.
This is good.
I was ready for that one.
Oh man, see, I could step on some toes here because
we're doing it.
Oh man, I want to be delicate. I was never a fan. There was a moment not very long ago that like Sperry's were everywhere, and I remember being like, man, none of us are on boats. Like everything, like the worst trends for me were right. What's a store doing in the middle of the U.S.? No, but to me, like the trend pieces that get really big that have no applicable value in someone's actual life were always the ones that were like a little funnier to me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the worst, but always the ones that kind of made me like turn my head like, there's no actual value in that, in the sense of kind of co-opting an item or a piece that was meant for a specific purpose and then making it fashion. To me was always the beginning of a bad trend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes they turned out better than others, but I'm trying to think of some bad ones. I'm not a big fan. This isn't a trend, but it's kind of a sartorial thing. I'm not a fan of a jacket or a blazer with a shirt untucked, which is something that's becoming pretty big now. Lots of people are rocking that.
I'm super nervous. Something that I'm going to be wearing is like going to be set up right now.
That's why I'm trying to tread lightly.
Well, I like what you said there about how certain items that don't really have any functional purpose are just popular for no reason, like a Sperry.
Right.
Because one thing that you had mentioned when you were talking about your men's store and like when fashion was becoming more like fashionable for men to talk about, it was all about practicality. It's like, sure, I'm going to spend X amount of dollars on jeans, but they're going to last me 15 years or whatever it's going to be. And so I think I can get way more behind that rather than being like, here's this really weird, unfunctional piece.
For sure.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I'm no fashion guy. But.
No, totally. And there's a way to do progressive fashion pieces that also don't look costumey or don't look completely out of place and like a quote unquote normal dude's wardrobe. But sometimes there are items that just stick out. And usually those are the ones that, to me, it was like costumey. It was always easy to tell when a guy was wearing something because someone told him he should, like his wife thought it looked good on him. You know what I mean? And
that's
that
dude
dude just looks uncomfortable, you know? So
what were like even starting in high school? Because that's something I think is interesting. That was not even something, and maybe it's because I went to Smithville.
Ooh, that's way up there.
Kind of rural, right? But
throwing shade at your alma mater.
That was not even fashion. Like really wasn't on my radar.
Totally.
You know, I took trips to Zona Rosa and went to American Eagle. But
yeah,
like fashion wasn't on my radar really yet.
Shout out to Zona Rosa. That was my first job. Was at PacSun.
Really?
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Love that PacSun.
Love Zona Rosa still.
But what were like either some of the pieces or trends like in high school that kind of got you into it? We were like, oh, this is something that like I really like.
Yeah. So, man, I remember it was for me. It all grew out of, and this is funny because this is a way to kind of like back into clothing. But to me, it all grew out of playing sports as a kid. And it's like there's this natural inclination toward like gear when you play sports, you know? And so not only that, but coupled with in high school, we took my club soccer team took a trip to the UK. and spent time in Liverpool and in London and in this little beach college town on the coast of Wales called Aberystwyth. And there's such a cultural uniform around soccer and just everything that goes into participating in soccer culture and like a deep level as a fan, whether it's like gear or there's this like look. I remember there's a movie called Green Street Hooligans. I don't know if you guys have seen Green Street Hooligans, but it's like all those dudes dress with like that slim track jacket and, you know, are rocking like similar stuff. And it's all like this cultural experience there, right?
They could all be an oasis at any point in time.
Totally.
This works.
That's right.
Yeah, like Premier League managers are some of the best dressed.
Oh my gosh.
people.
They really are.
I would get so mad at Bob Bradley when he would wear his tracksuit. It's like, have some respect. Have some respect for yourself.
No doubt. And then, for me, even then beyond that, it's like, and now this league is like the arbiter of style generally, but I also played basketball growing up, and basketball has this whole other cultural element around what people wear and how they dress. And obviously there's sneaker culture that goes into basketball way more than most other sports. And kind of this mix of like sneaker culture and being really into gear as just an athlete kind of naturally, when I realized I liked slim jeans, was like that took me into like being a gearhead about denim. You know what I mean? It's just like a natural part of what had developed in me as an athlete that then like translated into this other hobby. Because up until about the end of high school and college, I didn't really have hobbies. I had sports that I played, and then I went to school and tried to be as normal as possible. And then when that gets stripped away in college and it's like, hey, figure out who you are, I kind of already had that natural gearhead inside of me, and that found its way to kind of like live again in clothing. It's just weird to like process through that, but
That makes sense, though.
I think that's how it started for me.
Yeah. So as you're in college and you went to Mizzou, right? How did that hobby
Go Tigers.
You're studying and taking classes, and how did that hobby develop, or how did that kind of change from just hoping you win best dressed?
For sure. Oh man. So it started slowly buying stuff I couldn't afford on eBay, which then, as I continued to kind of find out about new stuff and the stuff that I wanted to invest in and buy, I took on a college job. I worked at a Starbucks and used extra cash to buy clothing, which was probably a really imprudent way to spend that money at the time, but you don't know anything when you're in college, right? And then actually, even funnier, when I really got deep into it, I had started a blog with some friends, and part of that experience in my life and starting that blog for us was like thrifting too, and like appealing to the Midwestern guy, because no one really talked to Midwestern guys about clothes at that time.
What was that website called again?
So that was the Midwestyle, which is also a big part of how I got plugged in on an industry level. But no, the Midwestyle, it's like we talk about how to look for valuable pieces that you could find at a thrift store, how to spot a good sale and find stuff online and do all that stuff, because a lot of your GQ magazine and a lot of the coastal stuff was just so much focused on editorial and pushing new product and trends, and that's so much less of our cultural experience around clothing is like so much less trend driven, I feel like, in the Midwest. Like,
it's
we
like
just
tried and true is what we're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking for a tried and true. And so we'd try and fill that niche by talking about an accessible way into clothes.
What were some of your favorite posts on that?
Oh
on that
man,
site?
some of my favorite posts. So this is actually funny, man. When you put anything on the internet, inevitably people are just going to drag it, right? It's just, no one's going to like everything you make.
We got
we got a couple iTunes reviews. We got words about.
For me, I did this post, and it was like, to me, it was kind of tongue in cheek, but it was this post about like when you first feel a chill in the air, knowing it's fall, and how much fun it is to dress in fall, winter versus in summer. It's like you can wear way more stuff. You can layer. You can do all these things. Men can dress better in fall, winter. It's just a fact. So I wrote this kind of tongue in cheek blog post about like riding like balls to the walls on my fixed gear bike to a midterm that I had been up all night studying for, and like I hit a curb and got a flat tire. That's a real story. Popped my tire, literally locked it up on the first tree, like sprint to my midterm, fill it out, do pretty well on it, feel good, walk outside, and it was the first time that it set in that it was like, oh, it's cold out. And I remember being so stoked that it's like, I can wear jackets again. And man, that post circulated on like Reddit, and people were just
whoa.
And it was like someone,
big time.
people were talking about, oh, dude, Reddit is where it happens. And there were people
So
like,
scared of Reddit.
man, listen to this guy talk about like how big a deal he thinks it is that, like he pops his bike tire. It's just like, this is so out of touch. And I'm being like,
Like, I go to Mizzou.
yeah, like I'm a college student who like kind of wrote this jokey post about being in my own head about doing a midterm and then realizing that it's like time to have fun again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know.
That's hilarious.
That's
People are mean on the internet.
Yeah,
I
people
don't
are.
like it. But
yeah,
It's
and
a
that's
hot
where
take right there.
this is like a little philosophical for all our talk about
I love philosophical
Sperry's
talk.
and things like that. But I just think earnestness is lost in our culture a
Yeah.
lot of times, and that's
No
where something
doubt.
I think like
No doubt.
you talking about in high school, but even now, like you probably get maybe not ripped by people,
Sure.
but like when you talk, people just don't get what you love all the time. And
Totally.
that can be hard.
It's like low hanging fruit to be like, oh, like he's into fashion, just overpriced stuff that doesn't matter.
Totally.
It's really easy to like write something off.
Especially when you're earnest about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
People just like to pick at things that you're earnest about.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Again, we see you iTunes comments.
We see you guys. Yeah. No, that's so true. And there's this sense that it's like if someone is earnest about something or really into something and passionate about it, if you're not, then you have to like justify why you're not instead of just accepting that it's like,
Yeah.
we've all got the stuff that we're knee deep in that doesn't matter to other people. And that's totally cool and okay and awesome. And you can still be like open to hearing about someone else's.
Or learning to appreciate it even though
Yeah.
you're not into it. Yeah.
You know
Yes,
what this
or-
makes me think of? My least favorite thing is when someone's like, oh, yeah, like sports balls, right? Like when the fact that you're into sports and like
Yeah.
someone else isn't, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
let's go
Right.
let's go to the sports game.
Totally.
It's like, okay, cool. Like I get that you don't like sports. Like I don't,
Right.
like it's okay that you don't like sports. It's also
sure.
okay that I like sports.
Oh man, it filters into everything, right?
Drives
It's like
me
TV shows.
nuts.
Yeah.
It's like when people, I remember, man, and it happens all the time. It's like a big cultural event, but it's like the season finale of Game of Thrones. I never saw more people talking about like how much they didn't like that everyone watched Game of Thrones. And it's like, why does this matter to you?
I liked it before.
Just
it was
move
cool.
on,
Yeah.
you know? Oh, I see. I didn't.
No,
so I was a
I'm
late
I'm
adopter.
laughing, but like that's the mentality. It's like I liked
Right.
it before it was cool. I
Right.
liked this multi-million-dollar project. Before it
Yes,
was
this
cool.
HBO show before everyone
Yeah.
else did. But no,
So you talked about the blog kind of connecting you, like getting you connected more into like industry and stuff.
Yeah.
Like how did that?
Yeah.
How did you just writing about your fix gear?
yeah.
How did that take
man.
you guys to?
So this was in kind of the infancy of blogging, which was a weird time on the internet too, because people were figuring out, rather brands were figuring out that a lot of potential consumers were reading these blogs written by normal people who had day jobs or were students or, weren't professionals at writing, weren't press folks at magazines, and that was the only way you used to plug clothing and drops and new stuff was through, on the women's side, there's a million magazines. For men, it was really only a handful. It's like Esquire, GQ. If you were plugging certain products, maybe you hit up Maxim. It's like there were so few men's magazines to like do clothing. And once people caught on that there were, people on the internet reading words by normal guys, it opened up this door to, like, hey, well, let's try and get them to write about our stuff, which was a weird thing for us too, to like realize we were on brands' radars. But I remember we got an email from Vans. Vans was our first brand that reached out and was like, hey, we just want to hook you guys up with some shoes. And we were like, for how much? And they were like, no, we just want to, we
don't
just
have a lot
want to
of money.
send you some. And they were like, yeah, we just like what you guys do. We know you guys have worn some Vans in the past. Just if you want to take them and photograph them and wear them and keep them, no questions asked, that'd be cool with us.
Yeah.
And we were like, all right, how many can we have? And they were literally like, whatever you want. So gave them our size, picked out 3-4 pairs. They showed up on the doorstep of the house that I split with 6 guys on William Street in Columbia, and wore those Vans around took photos in them, posted them on the internet. And then as it continued, it's like those relationships with brands get a little bit more litigated in terms of what they expect from you when they send you product. And that's how eventually we've ended up in this like influencer culture. It all kind of started in the beginning, which was like the Wild West of brands. Like,
I know, I'm thinking
how do we
now,
capture consumers through these people,
Now a trip down my Instagram feed at any time is just like sponsored, like any,
Totally.
Like, I wouldn't be shocked if my mom she has like 80 on Instagram followers. She probably has like a sponsored post for something. I don't know.
It's just such a different time back then. Like, what was
Yes,
it? I mean,
no doubt.
what's your reaction when everyone knows what Vans are. We all
For sure.
Like, I think I'm wearing. No, I'm not wearing my Vans right now. I had to double check. But like when Vans emails you like, hey, we want to send you free shoes because of your blog.
Yeah.
You're usually like, I made it. We did it. This is it.
There
Like,
was
that the apex at the moment?
It definitely was. It was a surreal thing because you realize it was this cool moment of us pursuing what was at the time a passion project.
Yeah.
And realizing that your passion is also something that could conceivably be something that makes you money, or at least, gets you some kind of perk, which is cool. I think everyone is really comforted by the idea that like you can just really like doing something or really like something. And if you pursue that and just take some initiative and do a thing, someone's going to like it enough to offer you some kind of opportunity to get hooked up or make a little cash or, God willing, get a full-time job doing something. Like, we had there were people in the blogging world at the same time as us, usually in bigger markets, but, who ended up with writing gigs, like plucked straight off of their WordPress and into not quite a newsroom, but at least an editorial room for a magazine or, places like Complex and GQ even. So yeah, it's pretty wild that, and when that first happened, it was like, oh, people are paying attention, which was cool. When you start a thing, you don't know how many people are going to pay attention. And for us, it was that moment of, oh yeah, some people are at least, which was cool.
Yeah.
So.
It's just so crazy to talk about. I mean, this wasn't that long ago. And now everything's so changed to where it's like, can't really do this anymore. I mean, we've talked about it as we've tried to grow the podcast and everything. It's just, it's hard to do as much organic as you used to be able to do. And
no
the
doubt.
fact that like, it's like three guys from the Midwest at like Mizzou could start a blog. And then, like you were saying, there's people that are your contemporaries getting picked up by Complex later on and things like that.
Right.
Now there's all of these like channels you have to go through.
Yes.
It's just crazy. It's crazy how technology really does make things go so quickly.
For sure.
The fact that, less than 10 years later, it's just a completely different, it's a whole machine. It's crazy.
It is. It is like everything that starts off new ends up finding some sort of rigidity as it moves forward. And like people seek to formalize how you progress and move forward in those things. And so there, I feel like podcasting even for a long time was that same way. It was like you start and you just talk, and if you do it early enough, you get the benefit of being there when people start to pay attention. Marin, exactly.
Yeah.
Marin.
Yeah. WTF is like the perfect example.
Ira Glass.
Don't get me started on Simmons.
NPR,
Never
man.
liked that guy.
It is that thing of like if you're there in the beginning, you just have it's like I know people who were just early adopters of Instagram who have thousands and thousands of Instagram followers because Instagram decided to like suggest them as a follow like really early on. And it's this thing of if you're early to the party, you have the benefit of almost undue influence, and then it makes people who get in later in the game who are trying to do something else cool. It just makes it a little harder just because you're a little bit behind that 8 ball. But it's just the fact that you weren't an early adopter that makes that so difficult.
I have a great Instagram early adopter story that I don't know if I've told on the podcast, but I know I've always wanted to.
I want to hear it.
So I used to live with a guy his nickname was Cream.
That's a dope nickname.
And we always said that, or he had an idea that he wanted a coffee shop called Coffee with Cream, which I still think is great. I hope he's okay with me telling that part. But so he was early on in Instagram.
Yeah.
And he got the Instagram handle Cream. So just CREAM and just got it.
Which he later sold for $1 million.
He is yet to sell it. He's yet to sell, but he gets offers all the time. Be like, I'll give you X amount of dollars, thousands of dollars for this Instagram handle because some brand somewhere or some adult website somewhere thinks that it's going to make them like a ton of money to have this Instagram.
Right.
It's just crazy that that's even a thing. But
absolutely.
He was the right guy at the right time.
every new social network that comes out, I immediately take the handle LeBron and LeBron James. I'm just kidding. I don't do
Such
that.
a good idea, though. Such a good idea.
Okay, so
I took Buddy Buckets. It didn't really pan out for me.
yeah, you don't pick your ball players.
that Papa Shot company never materialized.
Never happened.
So you leave college. Talk us through. I mean, at this point, fashion's like a hobby, but kind of also a job. Like, what steps have kind of led you to now opening up your own men's shop in Kansas City?
For sure. So the big piece, and man, I got super fortunate to just know some of the guys who were involved in Baldwin early on. And once they knew I had obviously this interest and was writing the blog, a guy who now actually spends time at PlexPod here, Daniel Cummings, became a friend, and he essentially told me kind of right at the beginning of my senior year that they were willing to take me on full-time at Baldwin when I graduated from college. So from there, it was cool. I got to live my senior year knowing I had a job, which was awesome because not everyone gets to do that. But then after I left, moved back to Kansas City, found a $700 duplex that I split with two other guys, super cheap, because I wasn't making much money, so it needed to be pretty dang cheap. So, but moved down to Waldo, like 2 blocks from my house now, and started working out in Leawood, and that was right before Baldwin opened the Baldwin store on the Plaza. So got to move down, do that, experience the process of opening a store, which was cool. And then as the company developed, got the cool opportunity to do some management, do some buying, do a lot of different things like before my 25th birthday that gave me, a skill set a lot of people don't earn, or get the chance to earn for a long time. So I got to experience that in a short amount of time, have my eyes open to what it takes to keep a store running on a daily basis. Got a window into the buying process and filling a store with inventory and curating a physical space, which is another benefit. And then, the other thing I got to do, which was awesome, was go out to market in New York and experience what that's like, which is, for me, it was like another separate dream was just to go experience market because it's so much fun. You meet all these people, you get to meet the faces behind these brands that you love. And I was traveling out to market twice, 3 times a year, by the time I was 23, which is just, like I said, super fortunate, super lucky. Got so much good experience at Baldwin that, equipped me to even think about doing my own shop in a concrete way. And then that's where, kind of fast forward, but also just revert back to my relationship with Brian Simpson, who started the shop in St. Louis. Him and I actually kind of re-met. We'd known each other and run in similar circles at Mizzou. He's a few years older. But we kind of reacquainted ourselves on a rooftop in New York at Market right before he opened East and West in St. Louis. And from there, our friendship grew, and, our wives met and loved each other, and we'd go spend time in St. Louis. We had being from Mizzou, or going to Mizzou, we had a ton of friends from St. Louis, so we ended up in St. Louis all the time. I'd spend time at the shop with him, ton of mutual interests. And then from there, man, again, we were in New York together having a drink at some bar in Midtown, and he was like, what do you want to do? I was like, what do you mean? He was like, what do you want to, what do you see yourself doing long term? And I was like, well, I like it. I like what I'm doing now, but I hadn't been challenged with that question before. And I kind of immediately reverted back to what the answer had been and kind of my dream scenario, which was like, man, I'd love to own a shop. And he was like, well, what kind of stuff would you carry? And I was like, yeah, I'd basically have everything you have. I was like, you've basically curated.
You got good stuff.
Yeah, you've got the stuff that I like and would want to have in a shop. And he was like, cool. We should do that. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, East and West Kansas City. And I was like, that planted this seed that didn't fully sprout until a couple of years later. But it was just that first conversation that even gave me this picture of what would it be like to do a thing in Kansas City, and all of a sudden I had a skill set and some professional experience to even think about doing it for real. And then I had a guy who I knew and trusted and had this really great friendship with, who was like, we could do a concept that I've done there and partner up on this thing and do something really cool.
All right, let's talk about audible.com. You can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/chalkboard. There are over 180,000 audiobook titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. So make sure to go to audibletrial.com/chalkboard and get your free audiobook today. East and West, there's a shop in St. Louis.
Correct,
and
yeah.
So you're bringing it to Kansas City.
Yeah.
What, like you're running this thing.
Totally.
Here in Kansas City. So
Yeah.
what, I mean, your day-to-day is probably a little bit like what you've done in other,
For sure.
you know, a little bit of buying,
Yeah.
curating, all that stuff. What's your favorite part of the job
so
far? And the shop, at the time that we're recording, it hasn't opened yet. But
Totally.
when you're listening to this, it'll
We're
be
right there on the front door.
wildly
Month in.
successful in about
Dear,
a month. Yeah.
dear
Yeah.
listener, come find me, 1828 Grand Boulevard.
There you go.
My favorite part, and this is the thing that if you don't love, I don't think you should probably open a store. But the experience of putting a guy in a pair of jeans or a jacket or a pair of shoes that you could tell like kind of changes the way they see themselves. I know that sounds like kind of nebulous and ethereal, but there's this very real connection that we have to our physical stuff, you know, whether that's our home, our furniture, our silverware, you know, like I'll never forget when we were registering, my wife and I, for our wedding, and like all of a sudden really geeking out on like what table settings we'd want in our future house.
Yeah.
You know, it's like physical
it's
stuff.
great.
That was the biggest fight my wife and I had while registering. It was that Crate and Barrel. And I still think
Yes.
our silverware is too heavy. It's too heavy.
Oh, you don't like a heavy
We made a huge
silverware?
mistake. We also got heavy silverware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys.
People
I just
about to get
registered
married
for heavy silverware.
No.
No.
I did. I
Undo
gotta
it.
change it.
Undo it.
Lighten it up.
What happened?
Don't let anyone
I
don't let
never
anyone get
would've
it for
thought
you.
This.
So you're excited to be in the store
Yes.
helping people
And
connect
there's
with
yes,
products.
connect with physical product. To me it's so cool when you know you almost get used to it, but you try and keep it fresh, of that sense of a guy puts on something that he really likes, looks at himself in a mirror and is like immediately sees that as part of his life. You know, I think that's what's really cool about clothing. It's what's cool about doing an independent shop, is you get the opportunity to see that. And, you know, I also recognize at the same time, it's like selling nice men's clothes is totally like not essential to our experience as humans, but being able to add to the cultural fabric of Kansas City in that way is something I'm, you know, just incredibly humbled and excited about, because I love being able to do that, to give a guy something that he ends up falling in love with and really loves and like wants to take home. I think that's probably my favorite thing about it. It always has been. And, you know, there's this secondary benefit of that like you get to just talk and hang out with people all day. And that was always kind of the other favorite part for me about being in a space where people could just show up and you're kind of forced to talk to them. Some people dread that. And for me, being able to meet new people, man, like even just the experiences specifically being on the plaza, it's like I got to meet all kinds of people, hear all kinds of stories, get to know people from different cities that like I never would have gotten the chance to experience otherwise. And so I had a job after I left Baldwin that you know, had me in an office, and that was a huge change for me. And the thing that I felt myself missing the most was just interacting with people that I had never met and getting to know somebody, and getting to even like shed a little light on my favorite parts of KC if they were from out of town, but just being able to meet and interface with different and new people all the time is to me one of the coolest parts about being in a retail setting, and that's something I'm excited to do as well, especially in the Crossroads near downtown. So excited about that part too.
So walk us through the store. I mean, you're a couple days from opening at time of recording. So like, what's the vibe? What should someone expect when they come in?
For sure.
What music's playing? What's it look like?
Yeah.
I mean, you want people to be teased
Totally.
a little bit, but
We'll see how good I am at painting a physical picture from in someone's ears here. But so, man, the building we're in is awesome. It's so cool. So it was a building that was built in 1910, and the space that I'm in faces grand, but it still has the original brick. It's got the original hardwood floors, which is kind of insane. The first thing I noticed when I saw the space when I was looking around for places to put a shop was seeing this hardwood, and it was like covered in construction dust and super messy and kind of ratty. But even just looking down at it, I remember I leaned down, I licked my thumb, and just like wiped the floor, and it just had
Put your name in it.
Yeah, and I was like, I remember I looked up at my uncle who was my agent on it because he's been in real estate forever, and I was like, yeah, I think this is going to be the spot. Just seeing the brick, seeing the floor. I was also a history major, so I nerd out over old stuff in general. So being inside of a building that's 100 and almost 10 years old now is also really cool. Lots of wood. We used a lot of wood. We use these really amazing 12-foot beams that look really cool that are kind of leaned up against a wall. But yeah, for the sound system, it's like we've got these vintage speakers. My brother gifted me this vintage stereo console from the 60s, a Magnavox from the 60s. And so we've wired in, some old Pioneer speakers. It's got this really warm analog sound, all the music that comes through. And then, I've made the fitting rooms kind of a central part of the store because without being too cheesy, all the magic in a retail store happens in the fitting room, So I wanted that to be something that was kind of always available and present versus kind of, a lot of places, a lot of traditional corporate spots you go into. It's like your fitting rooms are going to be tucked away in the back because they don't want them to be, a feature of the merchandising of the physical store. And for me, I wanted to change that a little bit. And so there's kind of two fitting rooms right in the middle of the store, and then this seating area for your wife or your girlfriend to tell you that you look awesome in your new pants. But no, and then I'm kind of also a mid-century furniture. I've used the word nerd a lot, but I think that one's the one I'm probably nerdiest about. I got really into mid-century stuff to the point of driving to Des Moines a few times after work at my old job to pick up old pieces. But no, I've got this seating area with some mid-century stuff that I've picked up. So it's going to have, a vibe that definitely lets you feel like you're in the city, but also feels slightly modern in some of the stuff that we've infused with the fixtures. So, yeah.
Cool.
I'm in.
Yeah, I'm in too.
Done. Come
Cam,
check it out.
Well, Cam, thanks for being with us, man.
Yeah, guys.
We're looking forward to the shop, and we hope everyone checks it out.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for listening to our interview with Cameron Niederhauser, and thanks to Cameron for being on the podcast.
Oh, man, it was fun.
You can check out Cameron's shop, East and West KC, on Instagram at East and West KC, or on Facebook at East and West KC. And then if you're in Kansas City, 1828 Grand Boulevard, Kansas City, Missouri, in the Crossroads. Go check out the shop.
Thanks for everyone so much for listening this week and every week. We really appreciate it. If you want more of the Chalkboard Podcast, make sure to check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also visit our website at chalkboardpodcast.com. If you're a regular listener or just loved what you heard, please make sure to rate, share, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. Our theme song is Killers, written and performed by Salah Rajabnik, and you can get his music on Apple Music or Spotify, really anywhere you stream your music. That's it for us this week. We will see you all next time.